If you would take away all the bikes from me and I had to choose one single model, would I pick the R1300GS Adventure? Well, if the answer was simple, I wouldn't be making this video. So, it's been about a year since I picked up the R1300GS Adventure, and for those of you who have been following the channel for a while, you might remember the 6-month review I did on the standard R1300GS a while back. And that was basically all about the difference coming from the 1200 and the 1250 models. Now, the GSA is a little bit of a different story for me, as I rode the R1200GS Adventure for over 8 years, and then the R1250GS Adventure a year after that, so the GS Adventure platform is really nothing super new to me. I know more or less what a GS Adventure is supposed to feel like, and I also know what it's good at and definitely where it has its limitations. So this review isn't a first-timer discovering the GSA, it's more of an honest look at whether the R1300 generation actually moved the needle in the right direction, so to speak. So, I've done a full year on this bike, including a 7,000 kilometer or 4,500 mile trip to Scandinavia. So I've had more than enough seat time to actually separate the honeymoon phase from reality. So today I'm breaking it down into 6 different categories, giving each one a score from 1 to 5, and at the end we'll add it all up to see where the R1300GS Adventure actually lands. Alright guys, without any further ado, let's get into it. So, let's start with how this bike rides and handles. And honestly, this might be one of the shorter sections today because there's not really much to complain about here. When I collected it from the dealership last year, the weight was, well, I wouldn't say a surprise, more like a confirmation or a reminder, if you will. Like I said, I rode the GSA platform for 9 years straight, starting with the 1200, then going over for a year on the 1250. And then I switched to the standard GS when the 1300 came out. And going back to the GSA a little over a year on the GS, well, you feel it quite immediately. I mean, walking this bike around, getting it in and out of tight spaces, parking it in a moto tent and so on, I mean, it's just part of the deal. But what's also has been a part of the deal with the Boxer range is that as soon as you start rolling, the weight just magically disappears. And I'm not exaggerating here. It's been that way since my first 1200, and the 1300 is actually not any different. These bikes are really heavy on paper, but somehow none of it matters once you start rolling. So, has anything changed from day one when I picked up the bike and now, 15 months later? Not really. And I would actually say that in itself says a lot. With some bikes, you always have this kind of adjustment period where you're still trying to figure the bike out. Everything is a little bit different, what you're used to. But with the GSA, it's like coming home from the very first ride. And that hasn't wavered at all, I'd say. It's like putting on old pair of boots. You don't think about it, you just go. And also here in the mountain passes where I tend to ride the most for obvious reasons, it handles incredibly well. Even on tighter back roads where you think the bike of this size should start feeling a little bit clumsy, it really doesn't. And a reason for this is, again, the Boxer engine with its low center of gravity. And I mean, like I said 10,000 times, once you start moving, the weight, just like magic, just disappears. One thing I do want to mention though is that I have the active suspension on the GSA, which puts the bike in slow mode or whatever they call it, below 50 kilometers an hour or 30 miles per hour. Now that's really great for getting your feet flat on the ground at traffic lights when a bike is loaded and or you have a passenger with you. But it also actually reduces the lean angle a bit in lower speeds. I've actually scraped the side stand foot extension more than once on certain occasions, and that can really catch you off guard at times, but I mean, nothing real to worry about. And in my case, it's just on the left-hand side, but something to think about. Compared to the standard GS, and as you might know, I own both, so I can go back and forth between them. The low-speed handling is fairly similar, I'd say, but somehow a little bit different. The GS weighs less, but it's taller because of the sport suspension that I have on it. The GSA is considerably heavier, but I can get both of my feet flat on the ground when at a standstill, of course. That gives me a little bit more of a confidence at standstill. And yes, if you do tip over, and that will happen to all of us at one point or another, the Boxer engine is just to your advantage here. The bike doesn't fall over as much as a non-Boxer bike would do, so lifting it is a little bit more like of a reset than a full rescue operation, if you know what I mean. Where you do actually feel that extra weight is off the bike. I mean, like I said, walking it around, getting it in and out of a moto tent or just on wet grass, it takes a little bit more of an effort. Also, another thing that's a little bit more cumbersome is getting the bike up when it's fully loaded on the center stand, especially if you have the ignition off. But BMW has actually something called, I don't know, lift assist or something like this. Basically, with the ignition on, when you put the center stand down, the suspension first races in the rear and then in the front, and then it's much easier to get the bike up on the center stand. But you need ignition on for this to work. Regarding braking, some of you might remember from the 6-month review I did on the GS that the brakes felt noticeably weaker at first, but that turned out to be some kind of residue from the production, from the factory, on the discs and the pads, and needed a little bit of a break-in. I had similar issues on the GSA. Remember, at first it was like something's wrong with the brakes, but now fully broken in, they brake just as good as my GS, and even now I can go fully loaded up luggage and a passenger. I just use 2 fingers to brake and full power, so they perform really well. Gearbox was the same thing here, no missed gears really, nothing to complain about, no mishaps. The power, I mean, it's a Boxer engine. You have in this 1300, 145 horsepower or 148 or 149 Newton meters of torque. And actually, that's more than enough. I'd say you don't need more than that. Even when you're fully loaded up, you're riding with a passenger, the bike just pulls and pulls and pulls regardless of how steep it is. And that's really what makes the Boxer engine such a good travel bike, especially in mountain passes. And regarding the suspension, even though it's not so much to do with the suspension necessarily, I mean, suspension itself works really well. You can set it to soft and hard electronically on this bike. But if you do remember, the complaints I had on the GS is that it tended to be very light in the front. I mean, coming out of corners during hard acceleration, the front wheel tended to get a little bit loosen the grip a bit. On the GSA, with the larger fuel tank, it's 30 liters instead of the GS's, what is it, 19. The extra added weight just perfect for getting the tire planted on the ground during hard acceleration out of the corner. So yeah, riding dynamics and handling, that's gonna be an easy one. 5 out of 5. If there's one thing that the GSA was built for, as long distance touring and adventure. I mean, everything around this bike is literally designed to keep you as comfortable as possible for hours. I mean, the riding position and the wind protection, fuel range, regardless of literally where you ride. And regarding the wind protection, I went with the larger windshield on this bike, and it's the BMW stock one, a larger one, tinted, so it's not the third party. It's probably not the prettiest out there, but it does exactly what it should. It deflects the wind cleanly over your head without creating that turbulence behind you. And by saying that, if you've ever ridden the K1600 GTL at speed, you have probably felt the feeling. It's like someone behind you is pushing you towards the handlebars. It's not really pleasant, but the GSA, it doesn't do that. When it's in its highest position, highway riding at speed is absolutely no problem at all. I barely feel the wind, just a little bit on my upper arms, that's it. And if I compare it to the standard GS, it's not even close. I mean, the GS windscreen is fine, don't get me wrong, but the GSA is on a whole different level, I'd say. And paired that with the extra wind deflectors and the wider tank on the GSA, it's not even in the same league. I mean, that alone justifies anyone who does a lot of highway riding and long distance touring to get the GSA basically. And regarding heating, I mean grip heating and seat heating, I have used both extensively, especially during my Norway trip last year. And if you do want to get a GS or GS Adventure, if you're living in a part where it can be a little bit colder, don't skip it. Get the grip heating. And if you're really feeling luxurious, get also the seat heating, because you will regret it if you don't take them both. Trust me on this. Unfortunately, so far I have not been doing any proper winter riding with the 1300GS Adventure. I did my fair share on the 1200 especially, but also on the 1250. If you haven't watched it yet, I also made a winter riding tip video on the 1250. You can watch it here. Click the link, but not yet, because I want to make sure you watch this video all the way to the end. But I'll drop it down in the link or the description as well, so make sure you watch it after this one. Let's talk a little bit about fuel economy. During my Scandinavia trip last year, I averaged about 5.8 liters per 100 kilometers. That's 40 miles per gallon, roughly. That's a bit more than on the standard GS, which does about 5.4 liters per 100 kilometers, or roughly 44 miles per gallon. But then again, I mean, I have the mini bags permanently strapped to the sides of the tank. I have the larger windscreen and a wider bike, so I'm not really surprised that it's a bit thirstier. With a 30-liter fuel tank, though, the range more than makes up for this extra kind of fuel consumption. I was getting well over 400 kilometers or 250 miles between the fill-ups without the fuel light even being close to coming on. Now, if there's one thing that actually bothers me, and it has been more or less since day one, it's the seat. While the GSA is flatter and wider than the GS seat, and on paper that sounds like better for long distance touring and stuff like this, somehow the discomfort actually sets in earlier on the GSA than it does on my GS. It starts feeling around where the seat curves down, and that's really, really frustrating, because on my 1200 GSA and a 1250 for that matter also, I had an aftermarket seat, and I really didn't have that problem. That pain came later, more underneath and not so much a little bit farther forward. So I don't know if it's my particular ass and legs that has a weird shape to it that makes them become painful earlier on this bike than on others. But if you have experience from another seat, I mean third-party seat, that you felt this is much better than the stock one, let me know down in the comments, because I'm seriously considering getting a new seat ahead of my next Scandinavia trip in a few months. So let me know down in the comments. So let's talk two-up touring. I've only done a handful of rides with a passenger on this GSA, and from my side it's of course been great. I mean, the bike handles that extra weight really, really well, but for the passenger, I mean, it's decent, but it's not really amazing. I mean, it's always going to be a compromise on an adventure bike. I mean, the rear seat is fine for a few hours, but it's not kind of a setup where the passenger is going to be completely relaxed for day-long rides on end. If you compare it to something like a Honda Goldwing or a K1600 GTL, where the passenger basically has their own living room with a sofa back there, I mean, the GS is for sure a step or two below that. But for the adventure touring segment, it really does the job well, I'd say anyway. I mean, the GSA is still an adventure bike, it's not a luxury tourer. So all in all, I mean, the rider seat here is what's holding me back from giving it a perfect score. Everything else, I mean, wind protection, riding position, the heating, the range, the handling, all of this, comfort and touring gets a solid 4 out of 5. All right, guys, this one is going to be a split, because the electronics on this bike are genuinely excellent, but the user interface, BMW, we seriously need to have a conversation about this. Let's start off with what works and then work our way through to what doesn't. The TFT on this bike is absolutely great. It's the same quality as on the GS and the 1250 as well. It's readable in all conditions, it's responsive, it's reliable, no complaints whatsoever. On neither of the 3 bikes with this TFT, I never had a black screen. So really, really reliable. And last year, I also switched over to the BMW Connected Ride GPS unit, so I don't really use the Connected Ride app together with my smartphone anymore. The GPS is nice. Personally, I mainly use it for like a guide to see how much the road turns ahead. And it's also really, really convenient to be able to just quickly zoom in and out with the Wonder Wheel on the left-hand side. However, I think GPS manufacturers are in general a little bit they have a little bit a way to go when it comes to the kind of experience we're using everything. I mean, it's not really as intuitive as, for example, Google Maps on your smartphone. And on a bike, it always feels like you're roughly 10 years behind compared to when you're using your phone. I mean, with that said, there are third-party manufacturers of GPS units that have CarPlay. It's just, when is BMW going to introduce CarPlay on their units? Yeah, we'll see. That's one of my wish list, at least. Regarding the riding modes, I mainly use 3 of them. It's road for when I do 90% of my riding, rain for when it's really wet and cold, and then Enduro Pro for when I hit the dirt. And why not use the regular Enduro mode, you might ask? Simply because with Enduro Pro, it gives me full control over how long the rear wheel locks up when I brake and how much it spins when I twist the throttle. If I'm going off-road, I want to make those decisions all on my own without having the bike second-guessing me. I also deliberately did not spec this bike with the riding assistant package. That's basically an optional package from BMW when you buy a new bike. And that includes front and rear radar sensors, and you also get the adaptive cruise control. Also front collision warning and lane change warning. I have it on my GS, and while the technology is seemingly impressive, I was constantly annoyed by the fact that the adaptive part of the cruise control reactivates every time you restart the bike after turning it off. So if you don't want to use it, but you still have it on the bike, you will always have it on by default, and that's quite annoying, at least for me. And the dynamic brake assistant actually scared me more than once on the GS. Remember my GSA or GS video? It was cutting power and braking for me mid-corner because it thought I'm going to like rear end the guy in front of me. So when the time came to configure the GSA, I simply just left the whole package out. And honestly, a year later, I don't miss any of it. Overtaking on low traffic highways is so much smoother now when the bike is not reducing the speed because I'm getting a little bit too close to the car or bike ahead. So everything much smoother. Everything is more manual, just like the way I would like to ride bikes, basically. Now, the UI or user interface. And I'm going to be straight with you from the beginning. I haven't changed my mind at all since my 6-month review of the GS. If anything, after a year of daily use, I've just basically learned to accept it. And that basically means I don't use all the functions as much as I would if I had easier access to them. On the 1200, I was constantly adjusting things. I mean, suspension, the traction control, the heating, because all of them were literally one button press away. And on the 1300, I just leave it. Which is a shame, actually, because the bike has all these great systems and really good assist, but it just makes it so inconvenient that I end up basically not bothering. The multi-rocker switch is, at least in my opinion, a clear step backward from both the 1200 and the 1250. And I say that as someone who has been on this platform for nearly a decade. I know exactly what we had before and what we kind of lost. On my 1200, I had dedicated buttons, one press for heating, one press for traction control, one press for the electronic suspension. It was simple, it was direct, and no thinking required. I could easily adjust things without taking my eyes off the road. On the 1300, they replaced all of that with this kind of 2-slot system where you basically only have 2 functions assigned at a time. So if I have the windscreen and the heating assigned, which is basically what I tend to stick with, and I suddenly need to kill, for example, the traction control when I hit a gravel section, I need to start reassigning functions and compromise what I generally prefer the most. And yes, while I still can just swap over to the Enduro Pro mode, I still need to click the button the right amount of times and then pull the clutch and wait for the mode to activate. So that's not really as easy as just having a single button for those specific functions. And I still do not understand why BMW moved the ignition button from the center of the handlebars over to the right-hand side. The center was clean, it was logical, and it worked. Now it's on the right-hand side where the heating button used to be, and that's just trading function for aesthetics. And on a motorcycle, functions should always win, at least if you ask me. Another thing that has been bothering me is switching between comfort and dynamic suspension modes. When you toggle between them, it's genuinely hard to tell which one is actually active. I mean, the visual feedback on the display is not clear enough, at least not for me. And sometimes I just find myself pressing the button again just to check, which kind of defeats the whole point of having a quick toggle in the first place. So, BMW, here is my personal update wish list. Number 1, let me permanently disable the adaptive part of the cruise control so it doesn't reset every time I turn off the bike. And number 2, give me a one-press toggle for the traction control and the rear ABS without having to reassign anything. Number 3, let me control my auxiliary lights from the handlebar controls instead of burying them deep in the menu. I mean, we had that on the 1200, 1250. Please bring it back. And number 4, make the suspension mode indicator actually obvious at first glance. So, with that said, here is how I'm actually going to score this. The electronics themselves, I mean the display, the riding modes, the connectivity and so on, that's definitely a 5-star. But the user interface, I mean the multi-rocker switch, the button layout and how the menus work, unfortunately that's a 1-star from me. So by combining these two together, we get a score of 3 out of 5. I'm deliberately going to call this suitability rather than capability, because the question is what's realistic and what makes sense for most people that actually use and ride this bike. So, what off-road riding have I personally done on it? And to be completely honest, mainly gravel roads. I mean, Switzerland here doesn't really offer much in terms of off-road riding, so the only real chance I get is when I travel. And when I travel, the bike is usually quite loaded up with luggage and apparel, and of course also a tent. And that, of course, makes it a lot more heavy. So always when I'm experiencing the off-road side of the GSA, it's probably at its least ideal setup. But hey, I mean, you don't buy a bike like this to ride it stripped down off-road. And let me be straight about this. Off-road is where the GS Adventure gets more or less outclassed by lighter bikes. I mean, at over 280 kilograms or 620 pounds, plus whatever luggage you're mounting to it, you're dealing with a lot of mass on loose surfaces. I mean, compared to the standard GS, any lighter adventure bike for that matter, it just requires a lot more from the rider. But where the GSA absolutely shines is as a travel bike that also can handle light to intermediate off-road terrain. I think that it's an important distinction to make because it's absolutely unmatched when it comes to building a solid luggage system around it, especially when you're riding 2-up, for example. I mean, hard cases, semi-rigid or soft bags, the mounting points and the frame are there and they're basically made to be used. And while it gets heavy, the bike handles that weight extremely well on tarmac and as well as on gravel road. There is a reason that the GS Adventure has been the go-to travel bike for more or less 2 decades. The GS just works. And when you're loading up and when you're covering distance, this is probably one of the best bikes you can have. My only real hesitation is single trail riding with full luggage, especially when it comes to turning the beast around. That's where the weight really catches up with you. I mean, the GSA thrives on long adventure touring with sections of off-road, but dedicated single tracks all loaded up, that's where it gets, let's call it character building. So unless you happen to be our friend Adam Riemann, who can literally take a bike like this and throw it around on the most difficult off-road tracks you can find and do it so effortlessly, you might find that your own riding skills quickly become the limiting factor before the bike does. So, electronics off-road. I run the Enduro Pro mode exclusively, like I said earlier, which gives me full manual control over the traction control and ABS. I just want everything off when I'm going into the dirt. That's just basically a personal preference. Tires. This is actually something I've been experimenting with quite a bit. I started with the Dunlop Trail Max Raids from the dealer when I picked the bike up. And basically just I had experience of them from the standard GS where I liked them really much. I then swapped over to these tires I still have on the bike, the Mitas Enduro Trail Plus for my Scandinavia trip last year. And the reason behind this is I wanted longevity with a fairly aggressive tread pattern. These turn out to work quite well in sand and in wet mud, but on wet tarmac they were quite a much more slippery compared to most other tires I've been using for the past 10 years. On the side note here, on the standard GS, I currently run the Michelin Road 6 at the moment, and these tires are really good for street riding. I mean, really good. The profile is actually so steep, so I can't even use the full contact surface. I still have 10 to 15 millimeters chicken strips, even though I lean over until my crash bar is about to touch the tarmac. So that means you have a lot of contact area when you're leaning over. Can only recommend those tires if you're into street riding. However, for Scandinavia this summer, I'm going back to the Dunlop Raids. The reason for this is that we're gonna do some proper off-road riding, I'd say, on the Trans-Euro Trail in Sweden, but probably also be covering a lot of wet tarmac in Norway. And the Raids are probably the best I've found for wet grip among knobby tires in general. For now though, off-road suitability, and not enduro suitability, gets a 3 out of 5. Not because the bike is bad off-road, but because the weight compared to the competition, and that includes the standard GS, is a real factor once the conditions get rough. This is where the GSA really shines, and I think this is one of the main reasons that you are watching this video in the first place, as you probably want to know how the R1300GS Adventure can be kitted out depending on the needs and the priorities of the rider. And the thing is, the GSA is actually designed to be kitted out. I mean, this is not a bike that's intended to be ridden around stripped and naked. So whether you're going with hard cases, semi-rigid bags, rackless soft bags, or whatever, it doesn't matter. The GSA handles all of it, and it does so like a boss. My personal setup changes depending on what I'm doing and where I'm riding, basically. If it's just a quick day ride or a weekend trip where I want to keep things as light as possible, I'll run, for example, a set of ADV bags, rackless setup, and mainly because of the lightweight. Mini bags are always permanently attached to the side of the tanks because inside I keep tire repair kits, spare gloves, portable air compressor, all this kind of stuff that you don't really think about them until you actually need them. So always bring the emergency stuff when you're out riding. Today, however, I'm testing out our upcoming rack lock motor panniers, and these have a new quick release system designed for the original case carriers on the GS Adventure. And what do you say? Don't I look great? What I like about having different kinds of settings is that I can match the luggage to the trip and the purpose. So am I traveling too up, mainly on tarmac, where I want easy access and maximum convenience, then I'll probably go with a set of motor panniers and a motor case. And if I'm heading out solo on a long trip with a mix of both on and off-road, where weight really matters, then I'll probably pick the motor bags or even the ADV bags. Is it a day ride here in the Alps where I need just the basics? Then probably a tailpack with or without a set of ADV bag 16 and nothing else. And if I'm commuting to work or having a ride around in the city, I mean, just a motor case will handle everything just perfectly. So the point here is, regardless of whether I'm packing light or heavy, the GSA never complains. You just load it up and it just handles it. So let's sidetrack here a bit, guys, and talk briefly about lights. I don't think I can overstate what a difference the MTL9s make. So if you're riding after sunset, and especially on unlit mountain and forest roads, the gap between the stock head beam and the MTL9s is genuinely night and day. And I mean that really in a literal sense. It's completely different riding experience once the sun goes down, and my first recommendation to anyone getting a GS or GSA is to get a set of MTL9s fitted. Not only do they look great on your bike, but more importantly, they keep you safer when the light disappears. And the best part is, on the GSA platform, nothing of the MTL9s is locked out. You get full access to every single feature the MTL9s offer without any limitations. So, enough about lights. Let's talk a little bit about my Scandinavia trip this summer, and I'm building a completely different setup than what I'm having here today. As we'll be riding the Trans-Euro Trail, as I said earlier, it's gonna be quite a lot of off-road and gravel, so I want to keep the bike as light as possible, basically. And you might ask, yeah, why not just take the standard GS or even the T7 for that matter? And yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but the thing is, I simply enjoy the on-road comfort of the GSA a little bit too much, and I also have to cross both Germany and Denmark twice, and that's over 1,500 kilometers or 930 miles each way. So the GSA's wind protection and fuel range just makes that transit so much bearable. And to be honest, I actually debated with myself for quite some time on which bike to take. But in the end, I chose to go with the GSA just because of the long motorway stretches and of course also the better wind protection. After all, we're going to Norway. So for Scandinavia, I'm going with an ADV bag 70 base setup, and that's purely for weight reasons. I weighed the entire setup, so that means bags, apparel, camera gear, water, food, everything. 25 kilos or 55 pounds, all in all. And I think when you're going for an off-road trip like this, you really want to keep everything as light as you possibly can, regardless of the weight of the actual bike. Speaking of which, if you're interested to see a build like that in detail, I will be uploading another prep video before departure. So if you're into that, make sure you stay tuned and hit that bell icon, of course, for the channel so you don't miss it when I upload it. But to summarize, the category packing accessories gets a solid 5 out of 5. All right, guys, final category. Let's talk a little bit about what a year of actual ownership has been like. Reliability, I'd say mostly good, but not entirely. When I was heading north last summer in Scandinavia, I'm talking a lot about that trip in this video for sure, I was starting to hear this kind of rattling, scratching sound, like two cogs not engaging properly. It only happened when there was no load on the drivetrain. So for example, when I pulled the clutch while rolling, or when I matched the RPMs, so I was neither accelerating nor decelerating. It was this kind of noise that makes you think, should I turn around and head back home, or should I keep going? You know, after all, it was like at times. Anyway, I kept going. Luckily, I made it all the way back to Switzerland, and of course I reported it to my dealer, and turned out it was a fairly known issue on the first batch of GSAs apparently. They, of course, recommended to start with a drive shaft replacement, of course, covered by warranty, no problem there, except the part, or the drive shaft, was ordered in August, but it didn't arrive until around late December. So I literally had the bike sitting for months, knowing the fix, that it was coming, but it just took a really long time until it turned up. So, cases like this, it's always good that you have more than one bike, but still, not the best. If I would have this as my only bike, would not be very happy, because that would mean that my season was over. Not good. Anyway, now it's replaced, the noise is gone, at least for now. So yeah, no further issues apart from that. Nothing else rattling, no electrical issues, nothing really that seems to be wearing out prematurely. So all in all, I'd say pretty good. Now, here's where I'm gonna be completely transparent with you guys. Remember what I said in the beginning of this video? If you were to take away all my bikes and I had to choose one single model of all the bikes in the whole world, I would most likely go for the standard R1300GS, not the GSA. But hear me out here. As a pure riding machine for everyday use and weekend excursions, I mean the kinds I do most often here, the GS is lighter, it's sportier, and it's definitely more agile. And still, the GS is also, of course, a great travel machine as well, don't get me wrong, but it's the nimbleness and the agility I'd prioritize higher than wind protection and tank range. I simply do more fun riding than traveling, and that's the main reason I'd pick a lighter bike. But, and this is a big but, I still have yet again chosen to go with the GSA for Scandinavia this year as well as like I did last year. And I choose it every single time the trip involves 2-up riding, heavy luggage, or multiple days in the saddle. Because that's what the GSA is built for, and nothing else, at least not in my opinion. And no other bike does it better. So the real answer isn't really which bike is better. It's what kind of riding you're planning to do and what you're most into. So if you're mostly doing weekend rides or riding without a passenger, I would get the GS. And if you're all into long distance travel, touring, and 2-up riding and building a proper adventure setup, then the GSA is most likely a better choice. And if you're lucky, just like me, to have both of the bikes in the garage, I mean, well, then you're sorted and you literally have the best of two worlds. And you can pick and choose freely depending on what the next ride is going to be like. So, with that said, guys, value and verdict of the GSA gets a 4 out of 5. So guys, let's add it all up. Riding dynamics and handling, comfort and touring, electronics and user interface, off-road suitability, packing and accessories, and last but not least, value and verdict. So that gives the BMW R1300 GSA a total score of 24 out of 30, or an average of 4 out of 5. The BMW R1300 GS Adventure is an incredible motorcycle, and after nearly 10 years on the GSA platform, I think that the 1300 generation is the best one yet when it comes to riding experience and how the bike handles. But of course, it's not perfect. I mean, the user interface genuinely needs a redesign, and the seat, at least for me, could be a little bit better for the kind of distances this bike is made for. And if BMW ever figures out how to shed at least 20 kilos from this thing, they have truly something untouchable. So if you want to see the 6-month review I did on the standard R1300 GS, I'll link it right here. And if you're curious about how the GSA handles on proper off-road, we're going to find out this summer in Sweden on the Trans-Euro Trail. So make sure you stay tuned for that one. Alright guys, that's it for me. If you enjoyed this review video, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon so you won't miss out on more GS related content, which we have plenty of coming this summer and fall. Thanks for watching, and as always, ride safe.